Welcome to another episode of unComplex, where we take the complexity out of business and technology trends. Together with my host Lionel Pastor, I'm Adriaan van Berg, and we have the privilege today to have with us Erik Drukker, the CEO of BNP Paribas Real Estate.
Good afternoon, thank you very much.
Erik, thank you very much to have accepted our invitation. I'm very glad that you're here. Something interesting is that you're neither French nor Polish, and then you're running one of the biggest platforms of commercial real estate here in Poland. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
So I left Holland when I was 14. I moved to London with my parents. I went to school there. Then I moved to Israel. I spent there a year. After that, from 91 until 96, I lived in Prague, and I already started working in those days. And then from beginning of 96, so almost 30 years ago, I came to Poland, where I joined a company called DTZ at the time, and we were doing commercial real estate. And over time, we became the number one in the market and doing all the typical advisory services that an agency, a commercial real estate agency does. And then in the beginning of 2013, I moved to BNP Paribas Real Estate, where at the time we took over the whole region with a group of people, which was at the time Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic and Romania. However, 3 years ago we decided to pass off on that, and we sold those other three countries. And so I remain just with Poland, where I have 160 staff today.
And if I understand it correctly, you focus on the commercial real estate, not the retail, not the housing market, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we do everything except residential. Unless there's one small exception, unless you have an investment product where somebody builds an entire complex of apartments, rents them out as one owner, and then would like to potentially sell them on. So there are some examples of that in the market today. There's not that many altogether, and there are some struggles with that in the marketplace, but I think we may get to that a little bit later. But besides that, we only do commercial real estate. So the main asset classes we're talking about are offices, logistics, and all these warehousing centers. Sometimes we do factories as well. And then the retail shopping centers, retail parks, anything to do with retail, really. Those are the main focuses that we do. And throughout that, with a team of 160 people, we focus on, let's say, 7 business lines, where starting off with the first one, capital markets, where we are buying and selling and facilitating financing on behalf of our clients, but never with our own money. It's always with the investment fund's money.
Agency. Mm-hmm.
So typical agency services, because that is often the confusion between the companies of BNP Paribas being a bank versus BNP Paribas Real Estate. But we'll get to that in a moment. So that's the first one. Then we would do valuations. We do property management. So day-to-day management of properties throughout Poland. We have about 1 million square meters under management. Then project management. And then the leasing teams, where we are leasing on behalf of owners of properties, or where we are working on behalf of occupiers of properties in the 3 main asset classes, which are again office, logistics and retail.
Okay.
That's it in a nutshell.
Can you give us a bit of context over the last 10, 20 years? How has the real estate market in Poland evolved, changed?
It's evolved a little bit, I would say. When I came here, of course, in 96, beginning of 96, there were not many office buildings available at all. They were not even existing. So companies like Coca-Cola, for example, and some of these beautiful American brands, or North American or big European brands, they used to have their offices in the Palace of Culture. Okay.
Wow.
Yes, because there was no office space in existence. So some of the earliest buildings would include the Suite Center, what was then called Suite Center, the building on Aleja Jerozolimskie, this 2-level property just down the road from where we are sitting today. IKEA used to have their first shopping facility there, the IKEA retail store there, as their first very small first concept. Companies like Nestle and ABN AMRO Bank at the time, they had their offices in that property as an example. And then there was Curtis Plaza, which is in Mokotów, right, very close to Galeria Mokotów. That one literally a few months ago got destroyed and were demolished and will now make way for apartment building after servicing the market for the last 34 years, 33 years, sort of, because that was a building that was developed and built in 1992. So that's the kind of context that we're talking about. And so if you look at areas which have become extremely popular over time, like Wola, right? The district of Wola. So everything going from behind, let's say, the Westin Hotel going outwards. All those areas which have now been built up with office space, hotels, apartment buildings, expensive apartments. And another area of being Mokotów, the area of Galeria Mokotów. Those used to be all light industrial properties. So where you have today Browary Warszawskie, for example, that used to be a dilapidated factory, brewery. And it was closed down in the mid-90s. It was not useful anymore. It was bought by Heineken at the time. It was one of their big investments. And they closed it down, shut it down, and eventually sold it to a developer, as one example. Or right opposite the Warsaw Uprising Museum, until 15 years ago, there was an enormous building called Róża Luxemburg at the time. And that was the Philips factory, which was from the 1920s. And that got destroyed only, let's say 15 years ago, roughly speaking. It's always the same thing with everything that you see here downtown. Those used to be, including Złote really. I think that will be a good example. Złote location, the site on which the building stands today, next to the central station, that used to be literally an open field. There was no building there. And so over time, all these foreign developers came in, started buying plots, developing office buildings, and there's many great examples of great developers out there that have done tremendously well and have added true value to the city as we know it today. And those are very exciting times because I've seen them all, and some of them are already being demolished. Take, for example, Złota 44. There used to be a 4-story small shopping center on that site. That's gone. Hotel Mercure used to be on Jana Pawła, where we now have a very, very large office building called Q22 standing. Just one or two examples that I can give you. But there are many of them.
And from where, when you say it's a lot of foreign investors, typically from where did this investment come in the beginning, and how is it changing over the time? Which countries?
So in the early days, you would have Swedish IKEA as a property developer. They still exist today here. Their head office is in Zaventem, actually, their European head office in Belgium. But called Vastint, which stands for Vastgoed International. But that used to be called Sweet Center here in Poland. And that's the property where they started their business on the 2-story office building on Jerusalemskie, what I told you about earlier. You have American investors, American developers like AIG Lincoln at the time, which became White Star later on. You would have Ilbau, which today is called Strabag. And this is where you get the LIM Center from historically, where the Marriott used to be, right? LIM stands for Lot, Ilbau, and Marriott. That's the LIM Center. And those were the 3 partners that decided to build that building in those days. Now, Marriott has disappeared. Ilbau doesn't exist anymore. Lot still exists, of course. But
they're still in the building?
They have still a unit on the ground floor. They don't have offices there, but they have a large service center there. So, you get all these kind of joint ventures. You get all this kind of interesting angles, redevelopments, developments. And it was very easy in those days because historically, of course, you see that on the architecture. You have these three types of architecture in the city where you're talking about the architecture from before the Second World War, in the time when the place to go shopping in Europe was not Paris, but it was Warsaw.
Oh,
Okay.
wow, okay.
Yes.
Tell us more about this.
There's great
Interesting.
examples
Okay.
about that. One of the old department stores, very famous Polish department stores, was called Herse, Herse. And this was a family-owned business. Of course, it got, or not of course, but it got, unfortunately, this kind of didn't end up very well during the communist era. But Herse is making a comeback on the market, and they have just rented a couple of shop units here in the center of Warsaw. So it's a brand to really, really look out for, because that is true Polish history.
Mm-hmm.
And having been here for 30 years and left the Netherlands when I was 14, I feel more Polish. I'm very proud of Poland as a country in what they have done and what they have achieved. But coming back to the architecture, so you have all this architecture from before the war, then you have the time period of from the wartime until 1989, and then everything that happened up till today. And so you see all the different types of evolutions of those kind of architecture throughout the city, right? The most obvious one is the Palace of Culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? That was delivered in 1953.
Mm-hmm. And the most modern, like, if I'm correct, Warsaw has the highest tower in Europe, right? Is that right?
It's the highest tower in continental Europe,
Mm-hmm.
not higher than the one in the UK, which is the Shard.
Yeah, the Shard, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's still a little bit higher. But on continental Europe, Warsaw is the highest tower at 330 meters high, if I'm not mistaken.
And it has been completed a couple of, 2 years ago? Something like that?
Yeah, maybe a little bit longer, but yeah, it's very recent, last sort of 5 years probably. Yeah,
Is there any anecdote about this construction or that you know about it?
was of course very controversial.
Mhm.
The developer at the time they were not sure how to position the whole thing, and it took them a little while. Became a little bit. The thing is that they had a very large occupier at the time secured,
Mm-hmm.
and then that occupier decided to withdraw from the actual deal or before signing it, and then the tower was empty for a little while. So it took a while. But what is interesting is that they rented an office space in Złote Terrasse, in the office part, on the banana on the top of Złote Terrasse, on the side of Warsaw, where they had a completely hidden showroom, completely blacked out, where you could get the experience of the Warsaw Tower, which was going to be built on that site where it is today. And then the curtains would open and you would see the actual site location and how that building is, where the building is going to sit in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So, these are the kind of interesting little elements that people tend to forget.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, as I always love this example as well. People forget when the actual clock was installed on the Palace of Culture. And people are like, it's always been there, or isn't it been recent? No, it was actually a millennial clock. It was actually put in to the Palace of Culture in the year 2000. So, I can tell you many, many stories like that. And I'm very happy and proud to have gone through all of that.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
You clearly have a big passion for
Yes.
architecture as well.
Yeah, it's nice to see the evolution of architecture. I'm definitely not an expert, but of course having been in the business in Poland for 30 years, I have my opinion, I have my views, I have my and it's something which has been evolving a lot. Unfortunately, a lot of the more modern modern is not right, more recent architecture over the last sort of 25, 30 years is often very boring. It's only in the last sort of 10 years that you start seeing properties that really add a value to the architecture of the city. Take Warsaw Spire as one of the earlier ones. Take Złota 44. It was a very controversial property, but the design is there. And then there's a few. Hotel Intercontinental is an interesting one. Why does it have this hole in the property, so to speak, with a big pylon, big pillar on the far end of it? It's because of the penetration of the natural daylight for the people living behind it.
Okay.
So it's yeah.
Okay, that's amazing.
So there are
Fascinating.
many examples
That
like
could
that.
be a Switzerland rule, right? I mean, like to be sure that they get the lights and the.
Yes,
That's a classic.
it also counts here.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Erik, in talking about the market, 2023, of course, was devastating for commercial real estate all over the world. How do you see Poland in this? Has Poland recovered? Is it starting to recover, or how are we standing at the moment?
Oh, this is a tough one. That was 2023 when 2022. No, when did Russia enter? 2022.
Yes, but it's also because of the inflation. Everything was quite a perfect storm leading up to 2023 being the climax, I believe.
Yes, but the 2022 is important moment when the war started inside the Ukraine, because they did a couple of big things. It increased interest rates tremendously, and once interest rates rise too much, you being a banker, you know that. Once they rise too much, then unfortunately commercial real estate doesn't work anymore. With that, and the COVID situation of people starting to work from home and having sort of 2 days at working from home and 3 days in the office, or some companies the other way around, that those started to have major impacts on that, and you still see them today. But because then the financials didn't work anymore, the investment market, which was at 7.5 billion euros just before COVID started, so 2019, 2018-19, those were the absolute peak years, completely crashed. And in 2023, the investment volume was only 2.1 billion euros versus before COVID, it was 7.5 billion euros for the year. Now, we did make a recovery last year, and last year came to a very nice 5 billion euros throughout Poland. We'll see what this year is going to do, because there were many owners last year which owned properties which were on locations which people didn't want anymore. So, for example, in some Mokotów areas, but there have also been some examples in more central areas, where the occupiers didn't want to be in those buildings anymore. The value was not there anymore. With the question mark from the investment funds is, what is the true sustainability of such a property? Will it still be needed in the future, or should we just better all cancel all of them? Is it all home office? Is it not home office? You know, all this kind of question marks. And still companies today are struggling with this one. So some of these properties were sold, and they will be remodeled for apartments, or they will be demolished to make way for new apartment buildings. And the good old Mordor in Mokotów is a very, very good example of that. There are numerous properties that are disappearing, are waiting to disappear. So those are natural developments going with that.
So looking forward, are there specific sectors inside the commercial real estate that you are most hopeful for, or that you are more cautious for investments? What do you think? What's going to happen?
The market for sure will recover. It just takes a little bit of time. Throughout Europe, it was not just a Poland problem. Throughout Europe, this problem happened. The whole investment market throughout Europe collapsed by 80-90% versus the previous times. So that's huge. And now, of course, we do see recoveries, but they're very cautious. So take La Défense, for example, where there is a couple of million square meters of office space. There's about 1 million square meters of that existing stock where people are saying, we don't need them anymore. We can just demolish them. So all of a sudden you have developers, or funds, I should rather say, should rephrase, funds, companies that own those properties, that are stuck with these buildings that are not worth anything anymore because nobody wants to be there. They're empty.
And they cost money at the end because of
They cost money every month just to keep them running. So those are some of the examples, and they will also happen here. They're happening. They have happened already here as well. Yeah.
In terms of like, just to come back to the war in Ukraine, what about the pricing of the real estates? Can you tell us a bit more? What was the first impact? Is we all know that a lot of housing the price went up significantly. Is it sustainable? What do you think about that kind of like part of the market?
Following the influx of Ukrainians, 2022, 2023, which were somewhere about 3-4 million, roughly. So the country population went up by 10% overnight, so to speak. The rents went up. The prices of apartments went up, and before that time you could easily buy in, for example, in Wilanów, Miasteczko Wilanów, you could buy an apartment for about 12,000 zloty per square meter. That's completely impossible today. Same thing with the city center, obviously, of Warsaw, but the same thing in cities like Poznan or Wrocław or Kraków or Gdansk, Gdynia, etc. Everywhere they went up.
Yeah, but so you mentioned 12,000, and now like what's the price?
And so now, if you're looking at Miasteczko Wilanów, then you're looking at somewhere like 18,000, 20,000, and penthouses going for 30,000.
Okay. So price almost doubled in 2 years, right?
They almost doubled. In the city center, real estate went up so much that when you're now looking at new developments in Wola, for example, around Rondo Daszyńskiego, you're looking at somewhere like 40,000, 30 to 40, roughly speaking. Sometimes even higher. I know of a couple of places, apartments that have sold already for 60, 65,000. I'm aware that there are some developments in the planning or already under construction where you talk about 70 to 80,000. But those are absolute unique, single little properties where this will happen and may continue to happen. The same thing in Powiśle, 60,000, 65,000 on Rozbrad. But those are only a few examples, a couple of these little pearls. For the rest, it will not go that crazy. And for the secondary market, the resale market, it's been going down already compared to what it was, and you're looking sort of a reduction of 10 to 15%. Not in all areas of the city, obviously. Central areas will keep them, it's all about location. Central areas will keep and maintain their price levels. But if you're going a little bit away from the center, the secondary market has calmed down already a bit, and it's becoming more and more realistic. So, yeah.
And if the war, or like we all hope that the war is going to end soon, do you think that it's going to have an impact as well on the price, or like the market is strong enough to stay at those levels and move forward in the future?
I think that if the war will stop, if and when, because I don't see it at the moment, and the focus is on the Middle East. Everybody's sort of forgotten about Ukraine. Yes, it's changed a lot.
The narrative has, yes.
Yes, it has completely changed. There will, once that war stops and people will start going back to Ukraine, although I think it will be limited.
That's my question, yeah.
I think it will be limited. People have already left Poland as well, Ukrainians, and have moved on already to Germany, Netherlands, South Europe, UK, North America, particularly Canada. Then there will come the time of rebuilding Ukraine. And this is where it can become an interesting one. And I'm afraid that may hike up prices again. Because on the construction materials. That's a little bit my question mark at the moment. That may happen. No given, of course. It's definitely not assured. But I think that may be something where, everybody needs new windows. A lot of buildings need new windows and bricks and mortar, etc., that may increase prices. So we'll see what's going to happen.
Let's talk a little bit about the retail sector. So we have close to us Paribas-based mall, which we really love. But of course, one of the reasons we like it is because there are not so many people usually. It's quiet, you can go to watch a movie there. But of course, it's going to be demolished for normal residential flats as well. How do you see the real estate sector coping with the demand of e-commerce and changes? Let's say as well with these big residential parks that are popping up everywhere.
Okay, that's a very nice question. Very good, very interesting question as well. First of all, in my view, there are too many existing shopping facilities, centers, retail parks in Warsaw by itself. There are some of them, like Paribas Mall, like Cliff, which are on locations where they're squeezed by other shopping centers. So, for example, Cliff is squeezed by Złote and Arcadia. Right? Paribas Mall, you already gave the example. And so, some of those will obviously be turned into residential because they're in good locations. At the same time, we see more and more retail parks popping up, but more on the outskirts, like in Zawady, right? The one that was built by Galamco. Or, I don't have any other specifics, but they are PSH now. They're absolutely everywhere.
As a Vendo Park brand, it leaves quite a big player.
So the retail market is always changing. In my view, although it's very convenient, the city of Warsaw has made a major mistake. And that is they should never have allowed for a Złote to be built. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the high street in the city center is completely dead. It's horrible and it's very sad to see. Look what's going on Marszałkowska. You now start seeing some new shops appearing, but there are still many units empty today and have been empty for years. And so in my view, the city should never have allowed that. Nowy Świat, nothing survives on Nowy Świat. It's a very sad story. Milna.
Because of the rents or?
No,
why?
Nothing to do with the rents. People don't walk there.
Yeah.
Because there is Złote. Why would I walk on Nowy Świat to go shopping? Yes? Like what you find, for example, in Paris, London, Antwerp, Brussels, Amsterdam, Berlin.
Yeah.
Yes, everywhere. But in Warsaw, they made the mistake of allowing Złote to be built. Great for the Dutch developer at the time, ING Real Estate. Brilliant, beautiful property. Yes, the biggest glass roof of Europe, 1 hectare, 10,000 square meters. Brilliant. Did it do the city any good? On the contrary. On the contrary. It should never have been built, in my view. So, that's a controversial one. There will be people who will strongly disagree with me. No problem with that. We don't all have to agree on the same thing. But coming back to your question about the e-commerce, the percentage of e-commerce is only hovering between 8 and 9% of total retail sales, which is exactly at the same level as before COVID. It was only during COVID and just after COVID that it went higher. But it settled back down to the same percentage as it was when it was before. People want to have the shopping experience. They want to touch the product. Yes, they want to know what they're buying. It's also very social happening. Let's go shopping together, people will say. Right?
But with the retail parks, they have the convenience of easy parking, cheaper products, discounted products.
Yes. And that's the thing what drives the economy in Poland is the price. It's very much about how much does something cost. So if I look in recent years and following in the inflation rates that were quite high, the only growing part of the retail market are the cheaper things like Pepco, Kick, Action, etc. Those are the ones that are, improving and their financial results, not the higher end ones. Absolutely not. So I think I hope that answers your question a bit. But that's the reality of where we are today. But retail is very fluid, and as the spending power is increasing, you will see more and more retail parks popping up in the smaller villages or smaller cities everywhere throughout the country. Yes, where people never thought 10, 15 years ago to ever put a retail park there. All of a sudden they are there. Lidl is opening, Biedronka is opening, all the usual suspects. They're all, Rossmann is everywhere. Yes, whether you are here or whether you're in a little village outside, they're everywhere, because that's what's being developed. Our spending power is increasing. So, logical evolution.
Maybe we can talk a bit about the REITs, the real estate investment trusts.
Yes.
I'm hearing that's something that might come to Poland. Maybe for the people that don't really understand or know what is it, would you mind explain us a little bit what's a REIT and if we're going to see them trading here in Poland?
Yeah, this has been a question mark for many years. REITs, real estate investment trusts.
Yeah.
Basically there for owners of real estate funds to facilitate that under certain rules and regulations that a government will agree upon. We still don't have them. That's a bit of would be nice to have them. If we would have them, that would show a major shift in the market. We would see much larger volumes trading. I'm pretty sure about that. You get a lot of local investors buying into that. So it's not just the big international funds. If we look at other countries in the area, in our region, then, for example, Czech Republic, they have them. And the investment market is sort of divided 50-50 between local buyers and foreign buyers. In Poland, it's like 90+% of foreign buyers versus local buyers. But in recent times, sort of over the last 5 years, we start seeing more and more family offices being created by wealthy Polish people, Polish family offices that are starting to invest into this into this real estate.
That's the new foundation law, right? That has been implemented in Poland, and so we can see that there's more sophistication coming into Poland when it comes to finance, with maybe the REITs, we don't know, but the new family offices, which coming from Switzerland, this is something that is very common, obviously, in Switzerland.
Yeah.
A lot of families have their own, or you have multi-family offices that exist. But indeed, here, I haven't really seen that much of.
Yeah, and I don't see that the current government is very and going forward equally that it's very high on their agenda. One of my very good acquaintances that has also been in the market. She's running this kind of a association around REITs, and also she said, okay, it doesn't look like with what's currently going on in the government that anything soon is going to happen. So I would like it to evolve, because that will give it a completely different dynamic on the market, but in a much larger volumes and different products maybe, and etc. Because if you break down what was recently traded, let's say in 2024, the volume of 5 billion euros, which was broken down into 1.6 billion euros was offices, 1.6 billion euro was logistics, and 1.3 billion euros was retail. Then hotels was like 170 million, and the rest is just small drips and drabs. So those are things which would help other sectors evolve, like resi for rent or senior housing, this type of student housing, etc. Yeah. So.
And regarding tech, I'm quite a tech nut. Using specific software or maybe some technologies in the real estate sector that you're excited about, that you are keeping an eye on?
Yeah, it's a very traditional industry.
Yes.
It's not very fast evolving as such. The business has been around for hundreds of years. If I look back at my previous organization, DTZ, I was a company with true history, which started back in 1784. That old. So, honestly speaking, the introduction of computers, of course, has moved things forward. But it is not hugely different. It's still about human contact and facilitating a transaction and sharing knowledge on which you do a deal or not. I'm very much looking forward about the future of AI being introduced into the sector. And of course, there are some trials going on as to how this can possibly work, and how will I in the future potentially not have to show a property anymore because I can do it through any kind of other platform that will allow me to see the property from wherever I am in the world. One day we'll probably go that direction, but it's still pretty old-fashioned. So I don't see much of a fast-moving change in this today.
But I can imagine some of the first steps would be just to lighten the load in things like due diligence, assessing projects. There must be, also when you talk about ESG, there must be some big movement in this direction as well.
Yeah, ESG is always an interesting one. It was, they tried to really enforce ESG onto commercial real estate, as well as residential, obviously, over time as well. However, I have not seen a huge push onto this because it's quite costly versus what it truly adds, where it truly adds value on the whole bigger picture. But historically, and it's been already for a couple of decades now, much more important has been BREEAM and LEED certification. And that has various levels, like 3 or 4 levels each. And that has been a true selling point for properties, that they must have that. And funds are looking at that. What sort of level BREEAM or LEED certification do you have? Then there's this American thing called Wired Score, about how the property is actually connected to the world, through telecoms, internet, fiber optics, speed of data delivery, etc. So you get things like that. ESG is there. It's an important element, of course, as we're looking to continue greenification throughout every sector for whatever we are doing, whether it is, hybrid or electric cars or properties and so on and so forth. Those are natural evolutions, while everybody in every government tries to improve, and the sectors are trying to improve their net results as well. So this is natural. Will ESG, as it is today, stay in its current in that same form, in the current form? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe that will evolve into something new, something more explicit in the future. We shall see. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you, Erik. I think that we had a very interesting discussions today with you, and a lot of anecdotes that we'll be very happy to show as well, all those places in the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me today.
It was just a pleasure. Thank
Much
you.
appreciated.
And of course, follow and like, subscribe, and we're looking forward to bringing you another insightful episode. Bye-bye.